Hello, I want to keep this brief, and I want to start helping people with more briefer videos that cover parts of the game. I have a list as long as my arm of topics I want to talk about to help people with this game. And God, you could spend hours talking about each and every little one of them. So it's a bit of a challenge, but I'm going to try to start doing more smaller videos that just cover, one little topic or two, and don't take too long, don't get caught rambling in the swamp of ideas. And we just kind of get them out and talk about stuff and try to start helping people some more learning this game, because it's a hard game to learn. I want to start today talking about unit types, specifically infantry. Infantry are quite misunderstood, I think, in this game. I think a lot of people come into this game expecting them to be something that they're not, expecting them to be something that they've been in other games for them, or movies, stories, real-life stories, whatever, real-life tactics. You're going to learn how the infantry work in this game, and if you do, you'll find that they're not bad like everyone complains about, but infantry are very, very good. I have almost all of my kill medals come from infantry. I have 39 meat grinder medals. I know about infantry. They are good. You just have to learn how to use them. So we're going to start talking about maybe not so much how to play infantry in this video, but the different types of infantry, which will help us learn how to play them better, maybe in another video later on. So let's talk about different types of infantry. Infantry as a whole are cheap, cost-effective, typically compared to other units. They are vulnerable in the open, but they do well either in large amounts of woods, like in forests, or in urban areas where they have building cover, and also in, tight cities as well, where there's not a lot of line of sight, there's a lot of buildings. There's certain weapons that are very good at killing them, but almost everything can kill infantry. They can't really resist things like a tank can. But in return, very cost-effective. Some of their squads are very quick at killing things. Look, let's just get into talking about the categories. The most important type of infantry that there is Grunt Infantry. I would say Grunt Infantry are a type where you have assault rifles, machine guns, grenade launchers, and some kind of anti-tank weapon. Marines are an example of this, but I'm going to go down to mech rifles is honestly the most basic example, where you have rifles, slow firing but still present grenade launcher, and a machine gun. These weapons are all very important for suppressing the enemy infantry that you meet. Suppression is the way you win infantry fights. The squad that suppresses the other first while not getting so suppressed itself tends to win, even if it's a worse squad or worse at the job. And then they've got the AT4s as well, so that they can deal with vehicles that run up on them. While you can use these squads to run around and hunt enemy vehicles, I more care here for a grunt squad that I can resist vehicles. That when vehicles, which are faster than me, decide to bring the fight to me, to drive up on me, I can go, no, fuck off, you can't bully me, I have a rocket launcher. Very important. A lot of people forget this and forget the importance of grunt infantry and just play all the special snowflake squads like mech engineers, Delta Force breachers, AA, snipers, AGLs, recon, blah, 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 blah. And they just don't have enough units that can just resist everything. Grunt Infantry are not really great at killing any specific, kind of enemy unit, but they have the weapons required to suppress and deter every kind of enemy and destroy every kind of enemy on land that they meet, with the right micro, or, should they have a long enough, protracted enough fight. Unless they run out of ammo against heavy tanks, but we're not discussing that. These are your guys who are your line holders. They go in, they take ground, they hold ground. They can tell vehicles to fuck off. They can pin enemy squads in place, and they're cost-effective in how many dudes you get for survivability. This is important because one advantage infantry has over vehicles is they have the most hit points of any unit in the game for their cost. Even the weakest infantry squads tend to have more health than the strongest vehicles. Now, because they don't have as much armor, this doesn't translate to them being as survivable as, like tanks in a lot of cases. But it is good to know, especially in a building that provides you damage resistance. Cost for cost, infantry or cost for stats, infantry are going to be the best at resisting damage in a lot of cases. They're great line holders, they're great soakers, they're great to tank for the enemy's guns on them, while then your more specialist flimsy squads, like breachers, like Delta breachers or AGLs, weapon squads or anything like that, can not get shot at and do their jobs instead. So you need grunts. Don't sleep on grunts, they're very important. There is no substitute in my mind for a squad that has a whole bunch of deterrent or, disposable AT, or a good AT launcher like an airborne squad. and has the means to suppress enemy infantry so that allied units can finish those infantry off, or those enemy infantry just have to retreat. But we won't get into any more than that. I'm trying to keep this brief. Grunts, bring them. Next, I would talk about combat engineers. Engineers are kind of like grunts, but they're HE flavored instead. These guys are just anti-infantry grunts in most of the times you see them. They are defined by, instead of having AT weapons, they have HE, or instead of having AT rockets, they tend to have HE rockets. And they're just playing rocket tag. They're just like Soldier from TF2. They're just shooting enemy infantry with their rockets to blow them up. These are very effective against enemy infantry in the open at killing them. Once enemy infantry get inside the buildings, these rockets are not so effective against them. However, at killing them, they're still good at suppressing them though, which can be very important. Engineer squads will often tend to have close quarters weapons, like with these mech engineers. They don't have a machine gun, but they do have shotguns. These are very good inside buildings and at close range in general, but mainly in buildings. The combination of these weapons makes engineers an anti-infantry unit. You bring these guys in when you're worried about infantry more than you are about vehicles. Often their often their launchers, like these small Ds, do have enough heat penetration to kill lighter vehicles, but don't expect them to hurt anything that is even decently armored, like a Bradley or anything like that with up armor. They won't do the job. Still, very important units, very good for clearing woods out. You can see they got very high armor here as well. Very good for clearing woods out because they run into enemy infantry in the woods that aren't in buildings, so they have no cover from their rockets, and the rockets just blow them up. Boom, you win the fight, and it's over. Very good at burst killing enemies because they front load all their damage, a lot of burst rather than having sustained killing. Just great units for rooting out enemy infantry problems. So if you're fighting a lot of infantry, consider engineers. Next, similar but different, we have rocket infantry. S'mores are the best example of, well, no, they're the best rocket infantry, but they're like actually not a great example of it because they're more flexible than most rocket infantry. Most rocket infantry tends to just kind of be good at AT, like it's like anti-tank rocket infantry. So a better example would be like Rangers Mors here, if we give them their upgrade. These guys they have very high anti-tank penetration here. 600 heat pen is good for a shoulder-launched, a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher that you're using without guidance. Pretty damn good. It's bad for an ATGM, but it's good for a rocket launcher. And while it will struggle to get through the front armor of a heavy tank, it will kill everything else no problem. And if you get on the sides or rears of an enemy tank, these launchers will make very quick work of them. So these guys you can like leave them in towns in reserve or as a defensive force to surprise enemy tanks when they come for you. But often when I use a squad like this, like Mors, I prefer to have them in like a taxi, some kind of transport with treads or wheels that can drive them around quickly and hunt down the enemy vehicles I want to kill these units, because infantry are slower than vehicles. So when you have a tank hunter unit like this that's designed to kill things faster than it really helps to have a transport to help them catch up to the thing they're trying to kill and hunt it down before it can get away or go somewhere else and just ignore them. Even though they don't know about the rocket launcher team, a lot of the times vehicles just won't cooperate and come to you if they don't know you're there. They won't do what you say. So you want to be able to drive around and catch them with these squads. Like I was saying, S'more is a unique kind of rocket infantry in that they have a dual-purpose launcher. Their launcher fires both AT rounds and it can fire HE rounds, which does the mech engineers or does the engineer squad job we were talking about just before. So that makes them very flexible, and they're very cheap for what they do as well. While they're not as good as AT as a fully upgraded Rangers Mors squad, and they're not as good at anti-infantry as like a full-on engineer squad that has, maybe shotguns as well, for instance, they are still very good at both, and that makes them very powerful and flexible. But in a lot of the cases, when I look through the arsenal, I couldn't find another squad like S'more that can do both like that very well. The closest I could find is the Russian SPG-9 Spog, which has dual purpose. It has both kinds of rounds. But their anti-vehicle rounds only do 300 heat pen, not 600. That's half the penetration. And it's just not good enough to hurt or to really kill quickly moderately armored vehicles. But it will kill lighter armored vehicles very easily. So I guess the Spog is a comparison. But otherwise, you'd be looking at, say, for Russia, like the Vampire, which is very much like the Mors squad, just AT rounds, just here for tank hunting. Now, I've got a list to kind of keep me on topic here as I go through this. Yes, the next thing on the list to look at then for like our line infantry, I think the last kind of like frontline infantry that we're talking about is CQB Infantry. And that is similar to what we talked about with mech engineers before, in that they are anti-infantry, but they do it in a different way. Delta Force is like the ultimate breaching unit in this game, the ultimate CQB breacher. I would say there's kind of a subcategory here. You can be a CQB unit without being a breacher. For instance, Rangers Recon here has AT, which makes them grunty, they can take on vehicles, but they also have suppressed weapons, which are better at close range. When you see suppressed weapons in this game, typically they will have shorter range, but they'll have much higher damage. This makes them excellent at killing enemy infantry inside buildings, and just in close quarters in general, like if you run into each other in the woods, because in the woods you won't see each other until the last minute, so you end up having very close range fights there, line of sight is low. So they're a CQB unit, and they're good at it, but they're not a breacher, because what makes a true breacher to me is flashbangs. Flashbangs auto-suppress the enemy infantry that you're breaching the building of when you go in there. They only work inside buildings. You can't flashbang if you're on top of someone else in the woods or something. Only inside buildings. It's like a special ability that gets used when you go in a building that has enemy infantry in it. Suppression is, I don't know if I said this before, I'm sorry if I'm saying this twice now, but it is the way you win infantry fights. A squad that is suppressed is going to be at a huge disadvantage to a squad that isn't. Even if a squad is worse, even if Squad A is worse than Squad B, if Squad A suppresses Squad B and Squad B doesn't really suppress Squad A, Squad B is going to get fucked up, and Squad A might even just win, even if they're way shittier. Suppression is hugely impactful, and it will define who wins infantry fights a lot. So because flashbangs auto-suppress, it just means that flashbangs, you can just think of them as like an auto-win button. When a unit of a flashbang breaches the building of a unit that doesn't have them, the unit of flashbangs almost always is going to win, unless there's just tons, or like huge amounts of squads in there that they can't handle, or the flashbang unit is really hurt already. These squads are very good, because I'm going to jump in here and re-record this part to say it better. They're good units because they finish off enemy infantry the fastest. Engineer-type squads with their rockets are good at fucking up enemy infantry in the open, and they're good at suppressing and doing a lot of burst damage early on, and they can suppress enemy infantry in buildings, all that stuff we talked about. The thing about CQB squads and CQB weapons is that what they do is they go in and they kill the enemy before the enemy can get away. So a unit like Delta Force here is just a blender. You put, like, if you had, like, engineers, like, fighting an enemy unit in a building, it might take a little while to kill them all, right? You know, bang, bang, bang rockets, it's gonna take, like, you know, a little while. You put Delta Force in a building of enemy infantry, the enemy infantry will evaporate in, like, 5 seconds. I'm not exaggerating. Like, they will just be gone. That is what CQB squads do in this game, is they are killers. They are completely optimized with these suppressed weapons towards finishing, completely dominating and then finishing off enemy infantry rather than just beating enemy infantry. Engineers, very good at beating enemy infantry, but the enemy infantry might get to retreat. Pop smoke in the woods and run away from you before you find more launchers. They might just go out of the building and leave and you don't kill them quick enough with your shotguns. Squads like Delta and Power Rescue and all these like really stacked with suppressed weapons of high damage squads, they go in, they blend. They destroy enemy infantry so quickly that the enemy rarely has time to get away unless they've already started running before the squad gets in the building with them. That is what CQB Infantry bring, as, you know, you could say they're similar to Engineer squads because they're both anti-infantry, but squads like Delta, these very much breacher, CQB rifle-focused squads, these are for killing. These finish units off, they do not let them escape, unless the enemy is very quickly running away and reacting very fast. So that is the role of CQB. Finishers. Well, they can start it themselves, but they finish the job. You know, they don't leave it undone. Anyway, back to the rest of my commentary now. I guess if we want to separate the categories, you'd say that the rocket launchers are more of an engineer thing, whereas the suppressed weapons are the CQB part we're talking about now. And then you get squads like Delta, which combine all of that plus flashbangs, and they're just great. But then you might get Power Rescue, which don't have any HE, they don't have any grenade launcher or rocket launcher, but they do have flashbangs. So this unit isn't really like doing the engineer role of blowing guys up, but they are a very good breacher, and they have very good CQB weapons. Good units to use, but again, much like the AT, like Tank Hunter Infantry, I do not like to use breaching units on foot or having them lie around in reserve. I think these units are best used where you see enemy in a building, or you go hunting for enemy infantry in a building that you want to kill, or just enemy in close quarters you want to kill. You drive up, you get inside the building, you kill them, and then you leave, and you don't stick around. These units are very vulnerable to being bullied, much like engineers and a lot of these other unit types that aren't grunts, very vulnerable to being bullied by enemy vehicles. And I see that all the time, where people love to bring these, like, CQB or anti-infantry squads, and you just have, like, one vehicle, and you just kill all of them, or you make them all run away. It's kind of sad. Like, these are good units, but, like, don't overinvest in cool things like Delta Force, when what you really often need a lot of the time is a flexible unit like an airborne, a pair of mech rifles, or a marines that can handle anything. Maybe not optimized to kill everything, but can handle anything, you know? Alright, so let's move on to more types, because I'm 40 minutes in and I will not have this go over half an hour. I won't have it happen. Alright, I'm gonna do another retake here, because I rambled through this part really badly. Let's talk about ATGM teams now. Anti-tank guided missiles. These are anti-tank infantry, but they're defined by being longer ranges, generally, than close quarters infantry with rockets. Close quarters anti-tank hunters, like the mods we discussed before. I speak in general because they will always be like a weird unit that doesn't really follow the conventions. But generally, long range anti-tank. Guided means that, you know, usually they need to keep eyes on the enemy tank the entire time. If they lose line of sight or the tank hides behind something or pops smoke, the missile will fail to hit. It will usually miss. Some better missiles like javelins have terminal guidance. That means that when the missile gets close enough, it will spot the target on its own and no longer needs to be guided by the launching unit. Which means it can hit through smoke as well, because if the missile is close enough, it will see you through smoke and still hit you anyway. Because smoke just gives you stealth. It isn't perfect. It just gives you more stealth when you're in smoke. Typically, when looking at ATGM squads, in both cases they provide infantry with the uncommon ability to engage enemy vehicles at long range. Usually, infantry are outranged by most vehicle weapons, so this is an equalizer. It's a very powerful type of unit. They tend to be quite flimsy squads as a result to kind of counteract that. You tend to have like this tow team here. It's only 4 guys. You know, pick a random one from Russia. 4 guys, 7 guys, but it's a worse ATGM. It's a really bad one. It has very low heat pen, for instance. You know, this one 70 has 8 guys, but again, worse launchers, but you get 2 of them. It tends to be for the very high performance ones, like the Cornet here, with 2 launchers, not many guys, and costs a lot. So you pay a lot for these things. They're high tech in the infantry world in cost wise. That said, there are 2 major types of ATGM launcher unit to talk about when we're talking about infantry. At least to me, this is the way I view them. Single launcher squads or double launcher squads. Most ATGM squads are single launcher squads, like this TOW 2A here, 1 launcher. A lot of the ones I just clicked on were, you know, again, the same. Cat TOW only has 1 launcher here. I'm not saying that on YouTube. The Factoria, let me put the upgrade on, the YouTuber upgrade. Factoria actually has 2 launchers. But only 1 Conqueror's launcher here for Conquerors. Single ATGM launchers are the more traditional type. They, in a game where the tanks didn't have protection systems, are usually more than enough to defeat tanks on their own and really convince tanks to not try to fight them. Whereas, in this game, because tanks have APS, active protection systems, those systems, like every 5 seconds, they can stop another missile that would have hit the tank, just doesn't hit the tank, until the tank is either out of those charges for that system, or if you get in between the 5-second cooldown. So if you hit a tank with 2 missiles inside of 5 seconds, the second one will hit, because the first one puts the system on cooldown, and the second one gets through. So single launchers are not very good at dealing with APS, because until the tank runs out of charges, they usually have too slow a fire rate to follow up and get through a second missile in that 5-second window. Then there's the other type of ATGM squads, and these are the infantry squads that come with 2 launchers, like this weapon squad, my favorite squad in the game, the best tank hunter squad in the game in my opinion, who bring 2 javelin launchers. And with a lot of these squads you got to watch out, they don't actually fire both at the same time. So in this case, the double javelins here, all it actually does is increase the fire rate. So you'll fire 1 javelin, and then you'll have like a 50% faster rate of firing up the second javelin launcher, like as if it's the same launcher basically. You'll have a 50% rate of fire of javelins out of this squad than from a squad like Ranger's Javelin that only has 1 javelin launcher, right? And as it turns out, to channel Krennic a bit, that is enough to get through APS. Weapon Squad can defeat APS tanks on their own, because the second javelin comes out in time to hit the target before the APS cooldown has recharged, and so that second missile slips through. There are other advantages to double ATGM squads, which make them better than just running 2 single launcher squads. For one, a squad with more guys in it is more survivable, and even if you bring 2 smaller squads, like 2 TOWs that add up to 8 guys, it's still easier to lose one of those squads when 4 guys have died, and then you can't resupply it, whereas a weapon squad, you can lose 7 guys, but as long as one gets away, you can resupply the entire squad at a dump. So they're more survivable. Also in the way the infantry stack inside buildings are damage sharing, we'll cover that in detail in a future video. It's good to have like bigger, heartier squads. Another thing is that for whatever reason, I've noticed that squads like Weapon Squad with 2 launchers, or like for Marines, Cat Dragon as well, double launcher in the same squad. They tend to not pop off the auto-smoke behavior of enemy tanks and vehicles. I don't know why. I think it's just because enemy vehicles like kind of get confused by the faster rate of fire from the two launchers, but it's only from one unit, so they're like, oh, what's going on? I don't really know why. I hope it's not a bug, I hope it's intended, because it does give weapon squads and double launcher squads like them a bit of a big boost in being legitimately serious threats to tanks, because if players aren't paying attention, or they just are used to relying on the auto-smoke feature as a crutch, and they don't manually smoke, these squads will just kill you in 4 missiles. You know, 2 to burst the APS, and 2 missiles to actually do the damage and kill you. So, for these reasons and others, the double launcher squads are what I look to when I actually want to kill tanks. Single launcher squads are things I will use when I want to screen and deter tanks out of coming into an area. And when I say tanks, I should be saying all vehicles, because these things can also, like, obliterate other vehicles as well. Anything that doesn't have a protection system or is lighter, just single launcher squads will be fine at making runaway or killing them, and just being problems for them, roadblocks. But anything that's a super heavy tank with APS that's really going to give you trouble, that's where squads like double launcher squads like Weapon Squad are really going to come in handy. You do have to look at the heat penetration. Javelins are great because they do top attack. So they just go through the top armor of a tank, which is where the tank is weakest. And so they kill them really quick. A squad like Cat Dragon does have double launchers, but the heat penetration is only 750. And it doesn't do top attack. So it'll struggle to do as much damage to the front armor. But if you catch them on the sides or rear, great damage. And then you have things like Toes, which are single launcher squads, but have good damage and good range, and then if you upgrade them, they have really good top attack damage again. Just things to understand when looking at ATGMs. In general of ATGM squads, though, just try to play them at range. They're not built for close quarters combat. They're not good at it. It makes them worse in almost every way, I think. You want to have these guys generally as defenders of areas, screening and defending areas and saying no tank can come here. Or if you're on the attack with them, you're putting them in good positions that have a view of tanks that are in view of that position currently to ambush. Either way, be playing at range of these guys. They're not built for close quarters fights. They're built for long range. And without them, your infantry are very vulnerable to being bullied by vehicles, longer range weapons. So they're a very important squad to have in some way if you want to do kind of heavy infantry play that doesn't require a lot of other unit types, like vehicles and aircraft, to support them. I think just to emphasize it one more time, yeah, like single launcher squads, I don't take expensive ones either these days. If I take single launcher squads, I take the cheap ones like Toes as deterrents. For my real ATGM work, I try to take big squads like this. Alright, back to the rest of my commentary I was doing in the first take. Now we've already spent enough time talking about ATGM, so let's move on to the other weapons teams. We have AGLs and HMGs. AGL stands for Automatic Grenade Launcher, HMG stands for Heavy Machine Gun. HMG is better in some niche cases, but most of the time AGL is going to be better for it for what you want to do with them or what I want to do with them. So I'm going to talk mainly about AGLs. AGLs are everything great about grenade launchers, but souped the fuck up. They are very fast-firing grenade launchers, so they suppress and kill enemy infantry very quickly. They can kill light vehicles as well, as long as their armor isn't very good. But AGLs are just great at that job. Against enemy infantry in the open at long range, the inaccuracy of AGLs makes them actually worse than an HMG. That is like one of the few niches where an HMG team is better for you. If like you're in a, you're planning to be moved on foot at like a bunch of infantry just walking at you with no cover at long range, like 800 meters, an HMG will do better. But an AGL still does the job fine, and at closer ranges and against enemies in buildings, it is no contest. AGL is way better. AGL is one of those anti-infantry weapons that specializes in actually killing. So not only will it suppress the enemy, but it will actually continue to kill the enemy infantry even once the enemy is suppressed. Because once enemy infantry is suppressed, they take less damage. It's just they're keeping their heads down. So these are great weapons for dominating enemy infantry. The longer range on them as well means that they dominate infantry that can't shoot back at them, like grunt squads. Most squads don't have weapons that can fire very far against enemy infantry. So they will dominate enemy infantry in that sense. They tend to be flimsy, like this AGL team here only has 4 guys, but you do get some that are a bit hardier, like this Rangers AGL that has 6 guys, and the AGL can shoot helicopters, by the way. Very good fire support team for winning infantry fights, or just screening a whole area, and kind of like a tow team, basically saying, hey, if you approach me with infantry without vehicles, you're not making it. Like, I'm just going to shoot you in the field, you're never going to get close. Very, very, very good weapons for all that. HMGs can also be useful because they can shoot helicopters whereas AGLs, unless it's the Rangers one, can't. They have kinetic penetration instead of HE, so I guess they can penetrate vehicles that have good HE protection but not good kinetic protection. At close range, kinetic pen does more as well, but I'm not going to try to sell you on HMG teams. Look, I'm just trying to classify the categories of weapons right now. Some squads will also have AGLs while still being like a bit of a bigger squad, like these churny birdies, I would say are a really good line squad because like of grunts, because they have really high damage long-range rifles, or decent standard range rifles of high damage. They have grenade launchers and machine guns. But then, because they don't have AT, they're kind of more like, I guess, a weird combat engineer instead here, right? With, like, a very good grenade launcher. Anyway, that's AGLs. The last, like, weapons team you see a lot to talk about is AA. Man-pad teams, man-portable air defense. These guys tend to not be very good at killing heavy helicopters, especially Russian ones that have very high armor. But they are good enough to kill lighter helicopters outright. And more importantly than that, they are a deterrent. No helicopter likes being shot at by anything, even the tankiest ones. And it burns their flares, which makes them more killable by other systems. So manpad teams can be good to bring in to to deter enemy helicopters from operating in your area. Also, they can hide in buildings in a way that AA vehicles can't, which can make them much more survivable and stealthy to lie in wait to be that deterrent. You'll get a lot of different flavors of AA squad, and it's important to understand all the categories we talked about before of infantry and how they blend into other squads like this. For instance, you can see Troopers AA here is got their machine gun and grenade launchers, so they're like a fine anti-infantry squad in suppressing in that sense, and they're quite hardy, so they can be a bit of a grunt in surviving. No AT, though, they traded up for the Stinger, so they're kind of like an infantry squad with a Stinger instead of AT. A different kind of comparison is the airborne weapons team. For the same price, these guys are very flimsy, only 4 dudes, but they get 2 Stingers instead of 1. Now again, this doesn't fire at the same time. It's a 50% fire rate in practice. So that will be more effective at putting more missiles out faster. They have more ammo too. To try and, maybe you want to kill enemy helicopters more when you catch them with this team rather than just deter them. But because they're flimsy, if helicopters get rocket pods in range of you, they will just delete your Stinger teams, and even in buildings, rocket pods obliterate infantry. So that is one of the reasons these guys are more deterrents for me than killers, because you can't really rely on them to survive once a helicopter gets close either. You can get helo rushed by these things very easily. Helos can rush these teams very easily, unless there's tons of them in an area. And it's a bit of a dice roll on the flares, but again, not trying to talk about specific unit tactics here. So that's like all your teams, really, I think. All your normal teams. Or, sorry, not even all your normal teams. All your normal kind of like categories and roles of teams and their weapons. But there's more things to talk about as well, because we have special weapons to discuss as well. The 3 special weapons I want to discuss before we get on to special characteristics and then recon and finish this video up are Incendiary, DMRs, and Snipers. Now, DMRs and Snipers are kind of similar. We'll start with them. DMRs was a good squad of a DMR. Rangers. I'm using US for a lot of my examples because I'm a US main. But Russia has a lot of options like this as well. I'm just not like going into them right now a ton. Trying to keep the video a little bit shorter. So Rangers here are a squad that are a pretty, you can see they're like a grunt squad. Rifles, grenade launchers, machine guns. They have an AT launcher. Okay, crosses all the list, ticks all the boxes of being a grunt squad. But the interesting thing about Rangers is that they have a couple of DMRs. Now, why are DMRs good? Well, you can see that they have 500 meters of range. They're a bit longer ranged. They have high armor penetration, which just means they do more damage against squads of higher armor, or just more damage in general. And they have, good damage. This is at 1.5 is better than average damage for infantry weapons. And they're more accurate as well, so they'll be better at long range, I guess, in the open. But what really makes a DMR such a good anti-infantry weapon is if you go into the detailed stats by clicking this button, go right here to the Scar-H DMR and click on, or look down here at the Ignore Cover stat. This Ignore Cover stat does not show up on a lot of weapons. It's very specific ones that it shows up on. Artillery can tend to have it, a bunch of stuff can tend to have it. It's very good for winning building-to-building fights. Cover means being in a building. And cover usually gives you, you take half as much damage. So if you're ignoring 50% of the enemy's cover, you're cutting that down to they're only resisting 25% of your damage now. This tends to make quite a big difference. Squads with DMRs are very scary to face when you are an infantry squad yourself. Which is what makes, for instance, Rangers here the anti-infantry flavored grunt squad while still being a grunt squad of AT for the US side. You typically more often, redundant. You more often will find DMRs in squads like sniper squads and special forces squads instead. But there are, like, you know, for instance, on Russia we have Gorna Strelki. Again, they have 2 DMRs. You will find them around. Snipers are just the big version of this. They tend to fire slower, but they have 100% ignore cover instead. So that means the infantry you're shooting at may as well not be in the building at all, which means they take a lot of damage. The nastiest version of this, I think, is Green Berets in the sniper loadout. It's expensive, but you get 1.2 kilometer range Barrett, 1 kilometer range ASR, you get an MRGG S at 700 meters and a Scar Mark 20 at 600. All of these either ignore 50% cover on these marksman rifles or 100% on the ASR and the Barrett. You can stack like 2, 3, 4 of these squads together and just do one volley of shots that instantly kills, for instance, like a 4-man infantry squad inside a building. Just kills a weapon squad. Very amusing. You pay a lot of money for that little bit of memeing, but it can be quite useful in maps like Kaliningrad where people dig into buildings of weapons teams, and you want to just go around and popping them and, you know, sniping them, headhunting, and then moving on and going somewhere else. Again, like my tank hunter squads, I would say for that strat, have these guys in transports, taxi them around, get in, get the job done, and leave, because this is a very specialist squad that can't resist like a lot of other stuff. But good little headhunters, and very much something to consider when you're looking at infantry squads. DMRs and sniper rifles, if you can get them, they make a big difference. Look for that ignore cover stat. If you see ignore cover on a weapon, it's going to be great at turning building-to-building fights in your favor by ignoring that building cover. Similar but different is Incendiary. We're going to go to the Green Berets again for this one, because they have a great loadout for this as well. It's called the M202 Flash. This fires napalm. Infantry are not the only guys who bring napalm. You'll learn that quick if you play infantry. Don't worry about that. But napalm is very good for killing infantry, and some infantry squads get it. On Russia, your version of this is Ognjemechki. These guys also bring launchers. They're half the price. Napalm launchers, sorry. They're half the price. They have less ammo, and they're not recon, so they're not stealthy. They don't have good optics or anything, and they don't have as many smokes. GB's Flash has 4 of them. But again, not in a unit comparison here. They also have CQB rifles. They're pretty good. The point is more Incendiary itself. Now, the Incendiary launcher here on the Flash itself says it ignores 100% of cover. So the straight-up damage it's doing, 6 damage here with 20 heat pen, sorry, 8 damage, will ignore any building cover, which by itself is just doing really good damage and suppressing the enemy quickly, even if they're in a building. But the real key to the Incendiary weapons is the fire damage, the napalm, is a legitimate damage over time area denial effect. It'll apply a pool of fire on the ground, and that pool of fire lasts for, I don't know, 10 seconds, I don't know how long, and will damage anything caught in it until it expires or the unit gets out of the fire. This stacks. Don't think that one pool of fire is the same as having 4 pools of fire in an area, which is why with the Flash you want to fire all of them, not just one. 4 pools of fire in an enemy unit is 4 times the damage and suppression and whatever. So a little bit of fire, infantry tend to be able to survive and run away from. A lot of fire at once cooks infantry really quick. Incredibly good weapons for dealing with heavy enemy infantry players. If you bring in GB Flash or Ognjemechki, and the enemy are like sitting in buildings, or they're stacking in there especially, or they're in woods, you know, in woods they'll tend to run out of the fire better. But especially in buildings, great weapon for just going, okay, you're on fire now, die. Terrific weapon for that job. You can kind of think of them a bit like mech engineers in that sense, or sorry, not mech engineers, just like engineer squads in that sense of being rocket launcher-based anti-infantry. But because the fire is a little bit different, a little bit better in many ways in how it kills, as well as having the HE rocket effect damage, think of them like super engineer squads, I guess, in that sense. Extremely good for clearing out infantry. And if you're against them, just run away from the fire. Hit your sprints if you need to. Get out of the fire and you'll be fine. That's the way you deal with fire. Now we're hitting the half-hour mark, so let's quickly go over the stats and recon, and I keep moving the goalposts, but maybe it'll be a 45-minute video. Let's talk about stats now that you're getting and how they define your infantry. The stats we're going to talk about here, we've already talked about health. That's just how many men you have. Each man provides 5 health to the squad. Each time you take 5 damage in a squad, you'll lose a man. It is important to understand that as you lose men in the squad, you're losing weapons. So unlike other units that, like, vehicles take crits that can make them worse at fighting, but it's not really the same. Infantry are the one type of unit where, as they take damage, they are always going to be losing combat power because they're losing people holding weapons. It's always the same guys in the same order, I think, or the same groups of guys. So it tends to be you'll keep your special weapons alive till the end most of the time. Like an AA trooper will always keep the AA guy alive to the end. But just keep that in mind. But beyond that, yeah, I want to talk about armor, optics, and stealth. Armor matters a lot more than you might think coming in. Typically, it's only going to matter against small weapons, but that's what matters here, and it makes a big difference. A unit with 6 armor, which is as low as it gets, I think, will take a lot more damage from rifles and machine guns, and even things like grenades, I think, than a unit with 8, which is the median, or a unit with 10, which is the maximum that you'll find on infantry units. I won't go into all the math, I will just let you know this does make a large difference. I've tested it, and I've played a lot of matches in practice as well, like actual practical games. It makes a massive difference. Heavier armor squads, it's just intuitive. They live longer. And it's worth considering, the one extra thing I'll say then is it's worth considering how much penetration your infantry squad's weapons have can help you offset this quite a lot. Like, again, if we go back to the Rangers with the 10 penetration on their DMRs, or even Airborne of the 10 penetration on their rifles and machine guns, helps a lot with dealing with more elite enemy infantry. You don't get your damage reduced as much. I'm not going to make this video go longer than it needs to, but I have to do this aside. A lot of people go Airborne as a bad squad. Airborne is not a bad squad. Airborne is my favorite US infantry squad. I've retaken this video a few times. I'm not sure if I said this already in this video. I'm sorry if I did, but I have a lot of infantry killing medals. Or sorry, kills with infantry medals. So I'm not talking completely out my butt when I say that. Airborne is a really good squad. Give it another look if you've heard the propaganda that it's bad. Paper stats do not tell the whole story. You do not just have to look at the damage of an assault rifle, which is not the best weapon for killing infantry anyway, and go, oh, it's low, Airborne's bad. Airborne is not bad. Airborne is very, very good. The range, I'm not going to talk about Airborne right now in this video. Maybe in a future video we'll talk about the Airborne spec. But they are incredibly good infantry if you play them right at long range, as they're meant to be played, I think. Extremely good. Anyway, so that's penetration and well, that's armor, sorry. Armor matters. Then we have optics and stealth. This typically kicks in when it comes to recon infantry. All infantry at a baseline have 1.75 stealth, which is very stealthy compared to most units, but is just standard for infantry as a class of unit. Quick primer on how this works. I don't really want to do the math because this video will take longer, but basically, stealth matters as a divider. Your optics value for a unit, and mouse over it to see different things. Ground is all ground units, low alt is helicopters and low flying jets, high alt is high flying jets. Your optics value is divided by a unit's stealth to tell if you can see it or not. So if you have 1200 optics, you can see enemy units with 1 stealth modifier at 1200 meters, because it's 1200 divided by 1. If you have, 1200 optics and you are against a unit with 2 stealth, then you would only be able to see that unit at 600 meters, because it's 1200 divided by 2. It's half of 1200. Your stealth goes down when you fire weapons, but suppressed weapons lower your stealth less. So sometimes you won't be spotted by an enemy, but then you open fire and they spot you. Anyway, having said that, these are important stats to have for infantry. Typically with infantry, you're either going to have 1.75 on normal squads. You'll have 2.5 on fighting recon squads. That are like more combatant focused recon and are just bigger squads, and you'll have 3 on like stealthy squads that are small, that tend to be not very good at like taking damage or fighting, like snipers. Sniper rifles are good though, like, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the time you're having snipers sit still and hold fire rather than wanting to fight with them. And 3 is the best you can get. GB's flash are unique, well, I guess along with Divishanti for Moto, in that these are squads that have 3 stealth, even though they are quite effective in combat. Something to consider. Anyway, oh no, sorry, Divishanti only has 2.5 in the ambushers loadout. Get fucked. Sorry, Russia. That's kind of funny. GB's flash winning again. Anyway, the point is, or sorry, GB's just winning again in general. Oh, let's get it. Anyway, these stats do matter quite a lot. We talked before about how an infantry squad that gets suppressed first tends to lose the fight first. Now, in general in this game, ambushing any unit before it ambushes you is very important, but it matters even more with infantry, because infantry are always taking damage. Even when infantry are fighting units they're designed to kill, or, that they're going to beat handily, they're still probably taking some casualties in return or some wounds. That lowers their ability to fight, and they then need to waste time going back to resupply and coming back later. Ambushing is very important for infantry, even more than any other unit type, probably, because the better your fight goes, the better the ambush you get, the less time the enemy has to shoot you back and inflict any kind of damage on you at all. So you you really benefit from having higher optics and higher stealth as infantry, because these are the things that guarantee you will see first and shoot first, or even you can just decide to run away before the enemy sees you and just not take the fight. So high stealth and high optics, they go hand in hand, because having high stealth means you'll get closer to the enemy before they can see you. Having high optics means you can see the enemy from further away, so you don't have to get closer before you can start shooting them, or deciding not to fight them, or whatever the hell you want, right? Both of these things go hand in hand to make you better at not getting ambushed and better at doing the ambushing yourself. These are very important stats, and you tend to pay for them. And it's good to know, like, how this works combined with the other categories we've already discussed. Because Recon aren't like their own magical alien type of infantry. They tend to just be infantry that fall into the categories we've already discussed of weapon types, but then pay a bit extra or have some drawbacks to make up for the fact that they have good optics and good stealth. For instance, a great example of this would be Scouts in the Striker Cavalry. Compare Scouts in the Striker Cavalry to mech rifles. It's a very similar squad. They have identical weapons, except they have one less AT4. One less rocket launcher. So that's one slight way they're worse. And they cost 10 more, which is not that much more. In return, they get way better stealth at 2.5, and they get way better optics at 1750. 1200 is very standard, it's very bad. Well, it's standard for non-recon units, but it's not good. So, in that sense, once you start learning the categories of infantry, which is why I'm trying to do it this way today, once you start recognizing that infantry fall into a certain broad set of categories based on their weapon set, or maybe it's better to say that infantry weapons fall into a broad set of, like, roles, and you can define infantry squads by seeing what weapons they have, and then you can compare them and go, oh, okay, Scouts, I understand mech rifles, and now I understand Scouts automatically, because I know that Scouts is just a mech rifle that has one less rocket launcher, and it has recon stats, optics, and stealth. What's another direct comparison like that? I would say Rangers Recon are kind of like then a better mech rifles. They cost more again. They're better mech rifles with the recon stats, because they cost more again. They have CQB in this loadout, CQB rifles, so, less range, but way better killing power at close range. And they have better AT4s, but, you're paying more for them. And they have the recon stats, and better armor. For instance, you could go, here's a Stinger team for 80, that's 6 guys with a Stinger launcher. But then you can compare that to Power Rescue in the STT loadout. They also have a Stinger. But, you're getting the recon stats for 20 more costs. They get a laser pointer, which is very important for your recon troops. Very, very good to use these and snipers to laze in guided munitions. Again, not doing a play guide though, but just mentioning that. Laser is another thing you pay for that's very good to have on your troops. Love having lasers, very important for good play. But, you compare, you can go, okay, like STT is a Stinger squad, but it's also a recon squad. And you can look at their weapons and go, okay, they've also got a marksman rifles now. They're a bit of anti-infantry at long range. They've got a suppressive machine gun. Once you want to understand the weapons and how they interact and what their roles are, it's very easy for them to learn this game, to learn all the infantry squads by comparing them to each other, right? Is there one more good combo? Yeah, for instance, another great comparison is what I mean to say. Compare mech engineers to Forcon and Standoff. I forget I've said this before. In Black Ops, sorry. Notice the similarities. You have a mech engineer squad, but you're paying 10 more, but it also has CQB weapons and has stealth and optics. And better, same armor. Combat engineers have pretty good armor generally. So, it's just, you can start reading the code of the game. You can start seeing behind the curtain and seeing, okay, I can very easily compare these squads because I can see this is just that squad with this thrown in. Cavalry Scouts is kind of because they're so flimsy, kind of like a sniper squad, but they have an ATGM instead of a sniper rifle. So they have less stealth too. Things like that. Churny Birdie is, blah, blah, blah. You get it. I'm not going to keep on going on because if I'm lucky, I can actually wrap this up before the 45-minute mark and make this, a failure to be a short video, but not the longest video it could have been. I think the last thing we'll just quickly talk about then is the 3 types of recon. So we'll probably go to 50 minutes. In the same way that we talked about traditional infantry roles, let's just briefly summarize recon into Grunt Recon, Fighting Recon. That's one type. Or you have CQB NG Recon, which I would call your Anti-Recon Recon, and then Sniper Recon, which is your observers and your lasers. So we just covered some of this, so we don't have to go over it for too long. But for instance, Rangers Recon, that's Grunt Recon. They've got AT to kill vehicles. They're decently healthy at 6 guys, good armor. They've got a smoke, which is very important for surviving a lot of the time. And they've got CQB weapons, which makes them a bit less like normal grunty, but at close range they'll do just fine. Great for closer areas like tight towns and woods. You can do them in standoff, and then they're more like a mini airborne squad. But again, they're grunts. They're Grunt Recon. They have a Mors launcher that has longer range now. They're basically like an airborne squad, but a bit better, I think, in some ways. A little less range on the rifles, but they have a marksman rifle as well. So, you know, you can compare these guys to airborne pretty closely and kind of see how similar they could be in how you play them. And then, you know, you've got other grunts, like if you go, you know, Forcon standoff, Razvedka for Russia. Where are those fuckers? Razvedka, you know, rocket launcher that can kill tanks, rifles, da-da-da-da. So that's fine. Then you've got your scouts also, obviously. Very good example of that. Then you've got your combat NG recon, basically, your anti-recon recon, like, I'll bring them up again, the Forcons. Well, I brought up Forcon before in this loadout. Let's also bring up the, where are they? Spetsnaz VDV. Again, combat NGs with stealth and optics. So we've said that before, but just to bring it all together, of course, what does it make them good at? Killing enemy recon. Because these are squads that can very easily dominate other small infantry squads by just burst damage killing them with the launchers, because the enemy recon squads tend to be small and won't have many men to survive all those blasts before they can start firing back. So these guys are great at ambushing small enemy teams, because they have the optics and the stealth to sneak up on them, or at least against enemy recon squads to neutral out and fire at the same time. And then they have weapons specialized at shocking, suppressing, killing enemy infantry at close range, and then they have close range rifles to finish them off after the launchers are done. So these guys are great for just like sending them through forests and towns, and just being like, hey, I found enemy recon, you're dead now. These are your anti-recon recon. And then finally, what was the last step I said? Observer recon, yeah. These are your snipers. These are guys that you typically don't really want to be fighting with if you can get away with it. Scout snipers for Marines are the best deal if you don't want to fight, because they're 75, they're very cheap for snipers, because you only get 2 guys. So they're even flimsier than a normal squad, like, say, most of them tend to be 3, I think, right? Like an airborne snipers, which is 3. But these squads fill their own very important role. They can provide very effective fire support with the sniper rifles and the DMR because of what we discussed before of ignoring cover. They can be great at picking off enemy infantry because of their long range as well. But typically, a sniper with their maximum stealth and their great optics, one of the few infantry squads to get 2,000 range on their optics, and they tend to have laser pointers, they tend to be more useful as observers. If you shoot with them, you tend to reveal their position, which burns them. Now the enemy knows, not literally, sorry to use that term, it means as in it gives their position away. Now the enemy knows you have a sniper there if they're paying attention. So it's always a trade-off. If you're in a situation where a sniper could help by shooting, you have to weigh up, yes, but is it really worth this one kill or this one bit of fire support compared to keeping my sniper hidden and all the information I'll gain of them and all the laser guidance I can do with them in that position? And you have to weigh that up. Sometimes it's worth shooting, sometimes it isn't. If your weapons are suppressed, you won't actually give the unit itself away so much. Like, the icon won't come up and enemies won't shoot back at them automatically. But typically when a sniper fires, it has a very distinctive sound to it even when suppressed. You'll hear that, like, pew of it going off that kind of draws players' ears. And you'll typically see, like, a vapor trail of the bullet that gives sniper teams away very obviously when they fire. I feel like that tends to happen. Maybe suppressed sniper rifles don't do it. But anyway, so just to let you know, even if you're not getting automatically spotted, a player who's paying attention will tend to notice that a sniper is firing if their camera's near you, and they will then be like, I'm gonna kill that sniper. People love killing snipers. They're important things to kill. But yeah, more than the fighting, you know, at 20% fighting sometimes maybe, but 80%, it's so valuable to have units that you put in good positions where enemies aren't going to path by automatically. They give you so much recon. It's critical. It's so useful. You want to try and put these guys in places where enemy helicopters, drones, and other like units of good recon won't stumble too close to, and enemy units in general won't drive through. Because if you do that, if you're going to keep away, like, you know, 500 to 600 meters away from recon units, and you can keep, like, you know, 300 meters away from normal units, and you're inside a wood or a building, because woods or buildings double your stealth bonus, then typically your snipers are, unless the enemy goes looking for them specifically, are going to just be there all game long, and they're going to give you so much critical information that helps you play the game so much better. Though do note, just like how by firing with the sniper rifle gives you guys away, smart players will notice when you're hitting targets that you shouldn't be able to see, like hidden behind the lines. And that will start to be the mind game of a smart player going, oh, they probably got recon watching me, and then they might start doing a hunting party, might start sending drones and stuff specifically to try and find and sweep likely sniper areas to try and find you. They'll look, okay, my artillery got bombed here when the enemy shouldn't be able to see it. Okay, there's a tree line there that looks pretty good to put a sniper in, I'll go check that out, and then, you know, your sniper gets spotted. So consider that as well, is that there's a whole mind game with recon and counter-recon. Anyway, one more retake, because I tend to ramble through my outros, I'm going to do it again. But hopefully, well, I mean, that kind of sums it up. That's infantry. There was two kinds of people I had in mind when making this video. One was people who honestly just don't really know military stuff very much, want to get into Broken Arrow, but don't really know, like, what's an ATGM, what's an AGL, like, what are all these different kinds of weapons? Maybe you have heard of them, but you don't really know much about their role in warfare. And the second kind of person is someone who, you know, is into military stuff, a bit or a lot, but you don't understand yet how all these different weapon types work in Broken Arrow specifically, because this game, it's a game, it has its own rules, it's not like reality, it's not like other games. And I just hope that I helped you and anyone else who found this video interesting. Yeah, I think when you view infantry through the lens of, like, once you understand what the different weapons are for, not just the squads themselves, but what the different weapons are for, and their roles and capabilities and strengths and weaknesses, and also the importance of, you know, the stats that we went through, you can then start referencing between all the infantry in the game and kind of understand what's good at what's bad at what. Like, you can just, you know, it's like a party game. You can randomly just out of a hat go like, okay, Engineering Shnemaviki. Alright, it says engineers, I think that's Russian for engineers. But actually, in their standard loadout, they're breachers. They don't have HE beyond just the standard grenade launchers on their rifles. They just have some flashbangs, so they go in and they breach, and they use shotguns to do close quarters damage. But then if you put them in thermobaric, okay, they lose the flashbangs, so they're not breachers anymore, but now they've got HE rockets, now they're actually combat engineers. In that role of a combat engineer that blows guys out of explosives. Here's the Stinger team, but, you know, STT is your Stinger team that's also recon. Here's Scout Snipers, which are recon observers. Spetsnaz VMF. Okay, you're like a little recon squad that's also got a laser pointer, but is a fighting recon as well. But has DMRs for anti-infantry. So they're kind of interesting and different, right? In the way we know DMRs have their own strength with their ignore cover. They have machine guns to suppress. So that's like a good anti-infantry recon squad, right? In building to building. The way you can kind of just, like, look through the squads and I think get what they do at a glance, get the idea just by looking at their stats once you understand everything we just discussed, I think is quite helpful. So I hope it helped you. I'd like to do more of these kinds of videos, where I really want to do shorter ones, but, I mean, some of these topics, it's just, you gotta cut it into multiple videos otherwise to keep it short, because there's just a lot to talk about. But I hope that this was a decent, high-level, and decently brief on each topic discussion that was still helpful for you. If you'd like to see more of these, please let me know, and I can do ones on all of the other types of units in the game, breaking them down in the same way, what's good at what, you know, what you're looking for, what are your drawbacks, how you play them a little bit. And anything else as well, please leave me your comments, as I've been saying lately, asking me for if you need help for things. If you are having something you're having trouble with this game, please leave a comment asking me to cover it so I can help you out. And either, if it's easy, I'll just reply in a comment. Otherwise, you know, I might make a video about it if I think a lot of people, you know, would benefit from seeing it, and I can make it. Basically, I think I said this before, I want to try and help everyone who's having trouble with this game, you know, one video at a time. And this game is great fun, but boy, can it be hard to get into. So I'm here to help. That's the idea. So please ask me for what you need. I am going to stop rambling, and I'm going to get out of here before I make this video go any longer. I hope you enjoyed this, and catch you next time. Have a good one. See ya. And good luck in your games. Bye-bye.